Hello BookTube, it's Joshua here, and I'm going to be giving you a little reading update. I just read Ursula K. Le Guin's The Books of Earthsea. I read the first novel of it, which is titled A Wizard of Earthsea. I was surprised that it was only about 120 pages, so I got through it very fast. But I think she writes very intelligently and very beautifully too. I got so much pleasure just reading Le Guin's prose, just on a sentence by sentence level. It was very enjoyable and beautiful. But the plot of this novel is that there's a boy named Ged who is born with a lot of innate power in wizardry. And in this world, there are many wizards, and there's schools of wizards, and he's born with really a lot of power. And while he has a lot of power, he's also very flawed as a character. He's prideful and hateful. And this pride and hate causes him to try to show off by casting a spell way beyond his skill. He tries to summon the dead. And when he does this, just to show off really, but when he does this, he ends up summoning not a dead person, but a kind of shadow monster from the land of the dead, which comes into the world and begins to hunt him down wherever he goes. And that's the main plot of the novel. The shadow monster kind of haunts him and hunts him and tracks him down, and the shadow monster wants to possess him, actually. It wants to either kill him or possess his body and use his power for evil. So he spends a lot of the novel running away from it, until finally he realizes that actually, if he's going to have any chance of defeating it, he has to turn around and face it. So he decides to turn around, and he goes towards it. And when he does go toward it, suddenly the shadow monster turns around and starts running away. So in the last third of the novel, now he's chasing it. And he chases it all over Earthsea. And in the magic system of the books of Earthsea, every object that exists has a true name. It's kind of like it's like a name that wizards will learn, which will give them power over whatever object has that name. So if a rock is a rock, but it will have a true name, which a wizard can learn, and then that wizard can manipulate it. It can change its appearance or do something to it. And everything in the world has a true name in this Earthsea world. So, well, everything except the black shadowy monster. Ged does not know the name of the monster until at the very end, when he tracks the monster down, he realizes that the name of the true name of the monster is actually his own true name, Ged. And when he names the monster Ged, suddenly the monster disappears, and well, that's the climax of the novel. I want to show you that scene where he names the monster and defeats it by doing so. Because there's an illustration here which I think is really cool. It's this. See, that thing there is the little monster, and well, that's Ged's friend on a boat, but and that's Ged there. I just think this is a really cool illustration. But essentially, by realizing that the monster's name is his name, he realizes that the monster was always, in a sense, a part of him. It was a kind of shadow of his own death, which he summoned from the land of the dead. And I want to read you this excerpt which is a little bit after Ged defeats the monster. And he began to see the truth, that Ged had neither lost nor won, but, naming the shadow of his death with his own name, had made himself whole, a man, who, knowing his whole true self, cannot be used or possessed by any other power than himself, and whose life therefore is lived for life's sake and never in the service of ruin or pain or hatred or the dark. So the story, I think, is really a coming of age story, because at the beginning Ged is prideful and hateful, and that's what brings about this monster, and only when he realizes that the monster was a part of himself does he begin to be whole, does he become himself truly. I want to read you also a bit of the afterword that Ursula K. Le Guin wrote. I found it very thought-provoking. And here she's kind of in this excerpt that I'm going to give you, she's kind of talking about the tradition of fantasy stories and hero stories to be just good or evil, and to be very war-oriented. And this story is very much not war-oriented, although there are some cool battle scenes, but yeah, I'll read it to you. But there are no wars in Earthsea, no soldiers, no armies, no battles, none of the militarism that came from the Arthurian saga and other sources, and that by now, under the influence of fantasy wargames, has become almost obligatory. I didn't and don't think this way. My mind doesn't work in terms of war. My imagination refuses to limit all the elements that make an adventure story and make it exciting: danger, risk, challenge, courage, to battlefields. A hero whose heroism consists of killing people is uninteresting to me, and I detest the hormonal war orgies of our visual media. The mechanical slaughter of endless battalions of black-clad, yellow-toothed, red-eyed demons. War as a moral metaphor is limiting, and dangerous. By reducing the choices of action to a war against whatever it is, you divide the world into me or us, good, and them or it, bad, and reduce the ethical complexity and moral richness of our life to yes, no, on, off. This is puerile, misleading, and degrading. In stories, it evades any solution but violence and offers the reader mere infantile reassurance. All too often, the heroes of such fantasies behave exactly as the villains do, acting with mindless violence, but the hero is on the right side, and therefore will win. Right makes might. Or does might make right? If war is the only game going, yes, might makes right. Which is why I don't play war games. To be the man he can be, Ged has to find out who and what his real enemy is. He has to find out what it means to be himself. That requires not a war, but a search and a discovery. The search takes him through mortal danger, loss, and suffering. The discovery brings him victory, the kind of victory that isn't the end of a battle, but the beginning of a life. I find that very interesting. It's certainly true, I think. And you can kind of I think right now the modern trend in fantasy is to depict that kind of moral richness, and moral ambiguity sometimes. The whole good versus evil thing, I think, has fallen out of fashion today. Maybe Ursula K. Le Guin was one of the reasons that it has fallen out of fashion. Maybe she was one of the pioneers in changing that kind of tradition. And so that's interesting to think about. The whole afterward is very interesting, but I won't read the whole thing to you, otherwise it'll take too long. But that's that. I think I'm gonna hold off reading the second Earthsea novel for now, because I want to get to something else. I want to get to a classic Michel de Montaigne's the complete essays. One of the reasons why I want to read this is because, well, it's a classic, and it feels like it feels urgent. I feel like there's an urgency to read as many classics as I can. So I want to put this off to the side for now, because I definitely want to return to it, but I'll put it off to the side for now, and I want to read this. It's clearly a mammoth, and that's one of the reasons why I'm reading it. I was watching David Novak's videos, and he was saying that, I believe he was saying that he wanted to make this year the year of the mammoths, and he's reading, I think, or he was reading War and Peace, and he just finished The Monkey King, a Chinese classic. And so that kind of inspired me to read another mammoth, the Essays of Montaigne. So yeah, I think this will be my next read. But that'll be all for today. Thank you for watching BookTube. Goodbye.